don't like this web logic. Again, I'm having some problems with the connection pooling. Web logic always makes me cry with the configuration things. I consistently keep on changing. That's the reason why I think this web logic always have a problem with me. I think I should make it program something that will be only dedicated for a web logic JDBC only. That wouldn't change for anyone. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So, are you able to view my screen? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Did I have given you assignment based on JDBC? I think I didn't give you any assignments related to JDBC. Did I? With respect to JDBC, I I don't remember I have given you such thing. Let me just cross check with the messages. As you can see, write a program that demonstrates usage of user-defined initialization, destroy methods, and use factory means. Next assignment. Write a program, okay, that uses JDBC data source and values to the data source must be inserted using auto-align. Okay. What I wanted to do is I want you to create a program and the values of the data source like the connection URL, username, password, those are present, right? So those values, instead of inserting explicitly wiring, instead of doing explicit wiring, instead of doing we specifying the wiring, I want you to do auto wiring on that. Yes. So are you having any other problems like related to the Spring? Any issues? Okay. Mhm. So that's good to hear. Okay, let us just have a summary of what we had seen in the Spring DO module yesterday. Then we'll proceed with today's class. Okay. So we have seen that if we are using Spring JDBC, we are getting some templates. So instead of doing some common logic of JDBC, we are not using that common logic. We are only getting the objects, driving the data, and closing the objects. So that was the simple part of using Spring JDBC. We are getting templates, right? And we have seen if we want to work with connection pool in Spring JDBC, there are three options. One is built-in connection pool, that is driver manager data source class, but this is not recommended to use because it's a dummy connection pool and it actually doesn't create any connection pool, but instead it returns a connection object on demand. whenever the connection object is requested. Please hold the line. Hello, sir. Okay. అదే ఒకవేళ వాళ్ళ సర్వర్లో డిప్లాయ్ చేయమన్నా చేసేస్తాను సార్. ఓకే ఓకే అంటే క్లమ్కాట్లో ఎలా డిప్లాయ్ చేయాలి దానికి ఇన్స్ట్రక్షన్స్ ఇవ్వమంటారు సార్. ఓకే ఓకే మామూలుగా నేను లైబ్రరీస్ అన్నీ వేర్ ఫైల్లోనే పెట్టాను సార్. ఎందుకు మళ్ళీ వీళ్ళు పాస్వర్డ్ సెట్ చేయడం అని. ఆ లైబ్రరీ ఫోల్డర్లో లైబ్రరీస్ కూడా ఉంటాయి. ఏం ఇబ్బంది లేకుండా డైరెక్ట్గా వర్క్ అవుతుంది వేర్ ఫైల్. ఓకే ఈ క్లాస్ జరుగుతుంది, క్లాస్ అయ్యాక డీటెయిల్స్ పంపిస్తాను సార్. షూర్ ఆ 4 సర్వీసెస్కి ఇచ్చేస్తాను. ఓకే సార్. బాయ్ సార్. Yeah, sorry about that. So, driver manager data source is a dummy connection pool. We shouldn't use that because it doesn't create any connection pool, but instead it returns as a connection object on demand. So, on demand in the sense whenever we request. And there are uh, third-party provided connection pools. Those are C3, P0, Foxhole, DC30, Apache. We can also use them in our Spring application. We can even use web server managed JDBC connection pools. So if our application is a standalone or application that runs outside of the server, it's recommended to use third-party connection pool. If our application is a server managed and if we have an application server that has a good quality of its connection pool, it's recommended to use that connection pool, web server, okay, application server connection pool. So DAO class, basically a DAO class is something which separates the persistence logic from our business logic. All of the persistence logic needs to be kept in a DAO class. Okay. So if we have multiple database operations, let us say user insertion and user insertion and employee insertion and client insertion update delete, all those operations with everything. Okay, so we can create multiple DAO classes like user DAO, client DAO, employee DAO, and then have their respective methods in that class. So that's what a DAO design pattern is. So we can use a DAO class object in multiple of our other classes, business classes, where we have to use the persistence logic. So in this way we'll separate persistence logic with business logic. So these are some common steps of plain JDBC, what we have to do if we are working with JDBC, but we shouldn't have to do when we are working with Spring. Loading the driver, establishing the connection, creating the statement, begin the transaction, and performing our third operation, gathering the results, commit or rollback, closing the connection. So now this PPT, did we completed this PPT? I think we were in this PPT, right? So using Spring DAO based persistence logic, get access to JDBC template class through dependency injection process. This is what are the default steps what we do to perform Spring CURD operations using Spring JDBC. Okay, first thing we need to get the object of the template class. There is a template class what we will be using, which internally provides all of the common methods for our JDBC code, like loading of the driver or establishing the connection or creating the statement or processing the results. All of gathering the result, not processing is what we do, but gathering the results. So this is what the JDBC template class does for us. So we should get the object of the template class initially and perform the operations whatever we want to do as per our requirements. Then again gather the results, and these results are not in the form of the result sets. They are in the form of like list or map based on our method what we use. So if we use JDBC template class given by Spring DO module, it will take care of common activities of JDBC programming like establishing connection, closing connection, transaction management, and other common properties. So we need not to uh, bother about these things because JDBC template class will do this, and we are using JDBC template class. So in short, I can say that JDBC template class is an abstraction on establishing connection, closing connection, transaction management, and other common operations. JDBC template class provides us lots of methods to perform persistence operations on database software without using any JDBC API. So we will not use any kind of java.sql package. Okay. Without using that, we'll do our JDBC CURD operations. Query for X. These are two methods what we use for retrieving data, or I could say for select queries I need to use query and query for X methods. Update method is for non-select queries. Batch update is used for batch processing. Okay. So what are the limitations of JDBC? Why should I even go for Spring JDBC? So all the steps are mandatory if you are working with JDBC, like opening of the connection, closing of the connection, registering the class. All those steps are mandatory one. If you don't do, String application wouldn't, sorry, JDBC application wouldn't even work at all. Result set object is not serializable object, so we cannot send it over the network. JDBC exceptions are checked exceptions so that programmer needs to do some try catch or exception handling mechanism. Allows only positional parameters. There is no concept like named parameters in JDBC. Features of Spring DAO. So, what are the features that Spring DAO gives us so that we can understand whether we have to go for Spring or not? Okay. Allows to develop JDBC style persistence logic without using JDBC API. Ain't that cool? So I can use JDBC code, or I can work with my persistence with my relational database without using JDBC API at all. So I will not use java.sql package, but I will use RDBMS using Spring Java code. But internally it happens, it uses internally JDBC API, but I need not to bother about that as a programmer. The JDBC template class takes care of the common JDBC workflow operations, so programmer can concentrate only on application specific persistence logic development. Okay. So query results can be stored directly in a connection framework data structures which are serializable objects by default. Spring DAO internally uses JDBC code, so it isn't like if it is providing abstraction, it might use a Hibernate or any other thing. No, Spring DAO is internally again using Spring JDBC code itself. But note again, this is not like Hibernate. This is the plain template classes. This is not an ORM class. Okay, ORM feature. So we are in short doing JDBC only. We are nowhere related to ORM, any of the ORM. We are not querying POJOs. We are not doing some HQL kind of thing, query language. We are very much doing JDBC and database specific queries only. Just we are skipping some common logics. Okay. With the persistence, the common logics of JDBC we are skipping because the driver, the template class will do it for us. No, no, it also does many other things. We even got some special methods which retrieves the data not in the form of result sets but in some other form of collections. We even got support for procedures, which makes the life easier while working with procedures. It even got many other things. It even gives the support what you said, but if it is only that, why would even someone go for Spring? I'll create my own class which gives more. I'll create my own jar which gives more support than the loading of and registering the username and password, right? Why would I even go for such a big thing as Spring? It obviously gives some more support. Okay. uh, Depends. If your application is using Spring, then we should use, because it provides lot of methods and those things what we have to do commonly. If we are getting someone already had did that, if you are using like existing JDBC and now you have got Spring into your module, so adding one more jar and using Spring JDBC is a good thing, right? Why should I again do all of the methods? Like, I need to do the heavy JDBC programming. Why should I do heavy JDBC programming while my life is simpler with Spring JDBC, right? So, but if you are nowhere using Spring at all, and you are having very simple like CURD operations, it's not recommended to go for Spring, because you know the this technology is quite huge and your application size may increase, and wherever we get some abstraction, we obviously have a little performance degradance. Not that much, we get a little, but in small applications, why do we even have to bother? Why do we even go for Spring DAO and increase the size of the application? It is not recommended to do. Okay. So Spring DAO based processor logic is not database independent, because it internally uses JDBC code and database specific queries given by the programmer. To execute queries that returns multiple record, use query for list. Query for list is something that returns me a list of records, java.util.list. Result would be in that format. If I want to have the result in the form of map, we can use query for map. To execute select query that contains aggregate functions, I need to do query for long, query for int. Aggregate functions are like sum, count, min, max. Okay. So if I want to work with the sum, count, min and max functions, I need to use these methods: query for long, query for int, which gives me individual values, right? So I can even do query for list, but it becomes meaningless, because for only a single output, why would I even wrap it up in a list? Because a single output I can do it some other things. I may have to use it in the next line of code. So if I keep it in a list, I need to iterate over the list, take out that object, cast it, then use it. So it's two-step more operations. But if I go for query for longer int, I'll directly get my object individual value, aggregate function value. Okay. So we even have positional and named parameters. For named parameters, we have seen that there are some special interfaces we need to implement and some special classes we need to use uh, to replace the names. To use with to work with the named parameters, we have some other special classes. Okay, we'll even have a relook of the programs. Okay, so to work with the named parameters, we need to work with named parameter JDBC template class. So this is the class what we have to work with, the named parameters. Okay, named parameter JDBC template. Again, this is also a template which gives me some common logics. Single connection data source represents connection pool that contains only one JDBC connection object and will not be closed automatically when the Spring container is stopped. So this is very much important thing. Generally we get the connection objects, we do not close it. So that's a very bad thing. Even if our Spring container gets closed due to some reason, the connection pool is still active and the objects inside it are still active. So then it means that we are burdening the database server even when our Spring container is closed, or even Hibernate container is closed, if we are not closing the connection objects. So it is the programmer responsibility to close the connections whatever he opens. Okay. So it is recommended to keep the connection of close call in the finally flow. Until and unless we have some runtime errors or stack overflow errors, we will have no problem in closing the connections. In order to close a single connection, we need to call close method implicitly. This class is a subclass of driver manager data source. Both of these classes are related connection pools and not meant for real-time programming. So driver manager data source and one connection pool with one object, both of them are not meant for real-time programming. What is a connection pool? I have given a basic overview of what is connection pool so that we can refresh our memories with the connection pool. Connection pool is a pool of ready-made specified number of database connection objects. Whenever client needs a database connection, they can request a pool and get one connection object. So a connection pool is like a place where all connection objects resides. So instead of opening a new connection object every time ourselves, we'll get the connection of one connection object from the connection pool and return it back whenever we have used or our usage with the connection object has been done, so that it can be utilized with other applications. Client programs can do all database operations and release the connection object back to connection pool. The same object can be reused any number of times till the connection pool is destroyed. Connection pool will be in waiting state in connection pool for client request. So if there are no requests, they will be in the waiting state. So connection pool is actually a mechanism where we can have some default connection pools, connection objects, and default number of connection objects like 3 or 5, and they will be waiting or listening for the any connection to request to occur, and if there is any request, a connection object is given. Now if the already connection objects have been reached, like 5 are increased, so we can even specify how many connection objects should be increased. So if the limit is reached, increase the connection object with 2. So you can even specify what should be the maximum size of the connection pool object. So there are some mechanism with different and this differs with every connection pool mechanism. Okay, we need to be aware of what we are connection pool using. Okay, so if all connection objects of connection pool are busy, then client program should be in waiting state till any client releases a connection object. So let us say if I got a maximum number of connections, and even if I am getting a client request, he will not be get connection object till some other client releases a connection object. Until then he will be in the waiting state. With connection pool, we can increase performance of the entire application. In real-time applications, regularly we work with connection pool. When huge amount of customers are trying to connect with database servers, in those cases, better we can use connection pooling concept. Connection pooling can be done in three ways: dummy, third party, or web server or application server supplied connection pool. What is web or application server connection pool? To provide global visibility of Java objects and their references, we keep them in a registry software. With every application server, we get a registry software, and in that registry software, we can keep a global visibility of our Java objects. And in our cases, those would be connection pool. Example, so this registry software is like WebLogic gives WebLogic registry, Tomcat gives Tomcat registry. So this registry software is very much dependable to the server what we are using. The nickname or alias name given to the object that is registered with registries of the software is called JNDI name. Okay, so this is what we register our object with a registry software, and then we give a nickname to the registered object. We call that nickname as JNDI name. Java application uses JNDI API to react with the registry. Data source represents server manager connection pool. So in connection pool, we can have data source which represents a connection pool. Okay. So to provide global visibility to data source objects from multiple client applications, we need to register our data source object with registry software having a JNDI name or alias name. Initial context object. This is the main heart of the JNDI, initial context object. So this object represents connectivity between Java application and registry software. To create this object, we need JNDI properties. They are initial context and provider URL. So initial context is the object which represents Java application and registry software. So to work with JN initial context object, we need to work with initial context factory class and provider URL. These properties change based on the registry software, and registry software change based on the servers. Okay. Client application always uses JDBC data source to get access to connection objects of connection pool. JDBC data source object is an object of a class which implements data source interface. So steps to create a JDBC connection. To create a JDBC connection pool for certain database software, create JDBC data source and link it with the connection pool. So this is a basic overview of all the steps what we does in different servers. Okay, this is not respective to any server. This is a common or a generic method, overview of a method, steps what we have to do, what we should do to create a connection pool to a server. Okay, so to create, first we need to create a data source and link it with connection pool. Then we need to register the data source with registry software for global visibility. Client application performs JNDI lookup operation on the registry and gets JDBC data source. Get connection method on the data source object gets one of the JDBC connection object from the connection pool. So we are creating a data source, registering the data source with some JNDI. Then we are doing some JNDI lookup in our application and getting the data source what we have created, and using from that data source we'll get the connection using get connection method. Okay. Client application uses this connection object for persistence operations on database. So we can do our business logic whatever we want. Once we get the connection object, then we need to do connection dot close. So here if we are using connection pool, connection dot close doesn't actually closes the connection to the database, but it actually returns the connection back to the connection pool. Note: as you specify driver class, URL, username and password in WebLogic, we need not to specify once again in the Srring configuration file. So if we are using WebLogic connection pool and there we are specifying all these things, URL, username, driver class, and password. So we need not to even deal with all those things. We just need to specify the that we are working with WebLogic connection pool, that particular connection pool. So that's it. We'll get the connection object with all the driver class, URL, username, and password, whatever we have specified in the WebLogic. A connection pool is a factory that contains set of readily available connection objects before actually being used. Okay. JDBC data source object always represents one connection pool, one JDBC connection pool. To access each connection object of connection pool, we need to use JDBC data source object. Okay. Spring Framework driver manager data source object represents built-in connection pool by giving data source object. But we are not using this built-in data source in the real-time projects because we know it's a dummy. This is called a dummy connection pool because it does not pull the connection object. It creates connection object on demand. So driver manager data source implements javax.sql data source interface. So our dummy connection pool is nothing but an implementation of uh, data source of JDBC. I can say that. Okay. This class can uses given JDBC driver detail and uses JDBC data source object which represents dummy connection pool. Note, do not use the driver manager data source in your real-time projects because it's a dummy thing and it doesn't have huge complex logics of a connection pool. So it's a very dummy thing. We shouldn't use him. But as of learning stages, we can have a look around about what how to. So third-party connection pools or web, yeah, C3P0 or any WebLogic server web application provide connection pool, or if you have your own company created or your own connection pool, you can even go ahead and work it. Or if you don't want to work with the connection pool at all, you can also do that. You can get the connection object every time from the driver manager data source itself, but it is not recommended to use. Let us see some examples of JDBC. So we have initially seen that. Okay, we'll see with the to work with the JDBC template. I need to create an object of JDBC template, and this JDBC template is present in the Spring framework. And I have inserted the values into this JDBC template using Spring IOC or dependency injection. So in my application class, you can observe that. Just a moment, please. Assalamualaikum bhai. हाँ भाई चैनल बट्टा आइडिया नहीं है भाई मेरे को भी नहीं मालूम चैनल के पास नहीं मालूम भाई वो गूगल में देख लेके जाओ ना भैया sorry about that. So as you can see that JDBC template, for template I am referring a bean called template, and template bean itself is referring a bean called JDBC, DBCP, and DBCP is nothing but a data source, basic data source. Okay, and here I am not using the dummy Spring data source, so I am using some basic data source of Tomcat. So here I am providing all the URLs, driver class, username and password. So in this way, if I am specifying it over here, we need not to specify anything else in my client application. I'm not even specifying the JDBC template. I'm just calling a method on the select IMPL. I'm just calling select IMPL dot get employee details. So if I do that, I'll directly get the details. But here in my class, I'm using JDBC template. So I'm not doing all of those common logics what we have done earlier, right? The class dot for name, the driver manager dot get connection, create statement, execute query, and then while rs dot next, iterate through the result set. Then after closing those corrections, we are not doing any of those things. We are just using a single method, query for map. Yes, isn't that easy? So if you want, we can have positional parameters, and to specify the parameters, we need to give an object array. The order of the parameters should be the length in the same order in the array. Okay, we can't juggle it. So the length of this array and this arguments must match again. If there is only one question mark, one parameter, we only need to give one parameter array, one length array, one element length array. Okay. Yes, we will get multiple rows also, because it's a map. It will be pointing as multiple objects it will contain. Okay. So if we have multiple positional parameters, we need to give multiple elements in our object array. And here our array need not to be only object, it can be of also string, because as we know, java.lang.object is superclass of string. So we can specify any other argument or any other array that can give the value of this positional parameter. So query for int gives me an integer, query for map gives me a map, and query for list gives me a list. So these are all the third operations what we have done. So instead of query, I got update operations to do the update operation. So that's what we have done in our client application. After getting the map, we are just printing the map. So let me just execute it once. Did I stop parcel or what? No, I didn't stop parcel. So I got my map here. There it is. So employee with the clerk designation m.toString employee details of emp3 is. This is the map what I have retrieved. As you can see, this is a multiple map. Okay, single row with all of the columns inserted into it. And if I work with the list, in my list I'll get again a map of every column. Okay, so then again this map will have the same thing again. The key would be the column name, and the value would be the value of the column. Okay, if you want, you can open our command line and cross check whether they are the same or not, column name and values or not. So as you can see, emp id, emp name, silent job are the keys. emp id, name, sal and job are the names, and the values are the values. 4 Jagu 10,000 plus, 4 Jagu 10,000 plus. So in this way, as it's a map, it's very much convenient for us to retry or iterate or perform any other operations on the collections. We need not to do some heavy other algorithm to sort or search in a collection, right? So this is was a basic example. So we have seen how to work with the DBCP connection pool and C3P0 connection pool, and the difference what we have observed in this connection pooling is the programming is not changing. In the programming we are directly using this connection pool, but these connection pools are having some different property names. Like basic data source is having property name called username, whereas C3P0 is having a property name called user. So before going to use any connection pool, we need to know what are the properties we should apply it. Okay, because they are not common for every data source. We should be aware of that. Okay, and to use that connection pool, we have again used our Spring dependency injection. We have referenced this bean to some other bean. So that was a data source object. Okay, so mhm, mhm, mhm. If not server, we are having third party, right? Okay, okay, okay. Okay, but I have never seen any application that works with the plain JDBC code. We used to I've seen many monitors. Generally, core Java is mostly used in monitors. If we are using web applications, it's very much necessary for us to have monitors, right? Like our web application needs input from time to time, and we cannot keep monitors in our web application, so that those monitors are kept in some other applications, and in those monitors we'll use connection pooling, because it's not a web application, right? A monitor is a plain core Java or any other uh, third party supplied. So it's a very basically core Java thing. So in that place we can't do server thing. So if in those places, if I want to use the connection pool, I can't use WebLogic or any other connection pool. I need to go for either third party or my own created connection pool. So, there was an application which generates the bills and sends those bills to the respective users. There was a application which, for telecommunication purpose, there was an application which was a scheduler which generates the connect bills. Okay, like postpaid bills. So it used to get the data from the database, and based on some logic, it used to generate a bill and send that bill using itext PDF. We used to create that PDF file and send the PDF file to the users, mailing them using the mail API. Okay. Now fetching the record, the user record from the database is very much important for us. But now how fast we fetch is the how fast we send. Now to fetch the data from the database very much fast, we use connection pooling. Earlier, what we have used improperly connection pooling, and the speed was only like 50 transactions per second. So later on, we did some modifications and used some other connection pooling. We did some R&D, and then after our connection pooling got increased to 300. So Yeah, no, actually, it's not the one query, or it can also be one query. We just need to keep them in a loop. So, in that loop, from time to time, we need to log it. So, we from time to time we just log it. Like for 1 second, we'll keep a not 1 second. We generally do it for at least 10 minutes. So, for 10 minutes, we keep a for loop. So we'll start some scheduler or something which runs for 10 minutes. Inside that 10 minutes, we get the data and log it. Like for every 1 second, we just log it. For every 10 seconds or for every 1 minute, how many records it has been retrieved. So for every 1 minute, we just keep on logging it in a file or in some console. So generally, we do it on a file. So for every 1 minute, we'll come to new. For total 10 minutes, how many files got retrieved? So 10 logs will be there. So for the first minute, it have retrieved like 2000 records. For the second minute, it have retrieved 1600 records. For the third record, it have retrieved 1800 records. So in that sense, I can say the minimum TPS is 1600 and the maximum is 2000. It can't give any more than that. So based on the logging in any we'll generally keep it in loops, infinite loops, and that loops will make to terminate based on some time. So we have used C3P0 connection pool, and we have seen that this connection pool have different properties. So after specifying the connection pool, we have used this connection pool using dependency injection to our classes. So in our classes, we are having data sources, and data source will have internally the connection pool. So we need not to change our Java code at all to work with different connection poolings. So after that, DO named parameter. So we have even seen that we can use the connection pooling or Spring JDBC template. I won't say connection pooling. We can use Spring JDBC template, Spring DAO JDBC template module without using Spring Core container. It isn't necessary or mandatory. If I want to work with Spring DAO, I need to work with the Spring Core only. We can also work without Spring Core. Okay, in this way, single we need to create the data source ourselves, and for that data source I need to set the driver class username and password. So in this case we have using single connection data source. Like I said, this and the basic data source both are not recommended to use in the real-time projects. But if we are to do some testing processes, or we just want to delete some things, or we have a very temporary requirement, we can go ahead and use them. Okay, where performance doesn't. Yes, yes, C3P0 is a good one. We can use it. So all of them have some advantages and disadvantages with them, each of them itself. Okay, so based on our requirement, what is the best match, we need to work with that. Yes. No, we'll do one thing. We'll stop our session because even I got some other things. Okay, we'll have one more example. This procedure, how to work. So we'll just have a look with that one example, and we'll close the session today. Okay. So how to work with procedures in Spring. So oh my god, my bad. Sorry. Share screen. Start sharing and DAO procedure. Oh, okay. Are you able to view my screen? So actually this is my procedure initially. So I got my procedure get emp data. which has some in parameter and some out parameters. Okay, so the query is select emp id job and sal into my variables from emp, where ename would be ename. So I'll be providing the name, and based on name I want ename job and salary, id job and salary. Okay, so this is my procedure. Let me just create it. So procedure got created. Now to work with procedures in Spring, we have a class called stored procedure. Now if we extend this class, we get to define some SQL parameters. Using SQL parameters, we need to specify the parameters. Okay, so these parameters should have like in parameters and out parameters. If you want to specify the in parameter, we need to say new SQL parameter, only SQL parameter, which specifies that this parameter is an in. If you see our procedure, here we only have one in parameter, that is name. So I am specifying name as in parameter. Rest of the out parameters, number, designation and salary, are used specified using SQL out parameter. Okay, and the respective types should be specified as the second argument of this constructor. So params is an array of the constructors of SQL parameters or SQL out parameters. So in short, we are specifying all of the SQL procedure in parameters or out parameters using SQL parameter array. So then after, we got a method called set parameters. So this method is not present in our class, it is present in stored procedure class. So for this procedure class, we have to specify we have to set the parameters using set parameters. So this dot set parameters, we are calling this method, so it isn't present over here, it will go and call the super method. So we are setting the parameters what we have earlier created. So all of this we done in our constructor. So whenever we invoke our class, we simply create the parameters and set those parameters. Okay, so here this is also an important point to mention, that first this line is nothing but we are specifying the data source and the procedure name. As you can see, our procedure name is get emp data. So what procedure you are calling, you need to actually make a call to the super class constructor with that. Then after, you need to set whether this procedure is it a function or a procedure. So if I say this dot set function of false, indicates that it's a stored procedure. Then after, I need to specify all of the parameters. Then I need to set those parameters. And a simple call to the compile will compile my stored procedure. So it's a quite different methodology what we do generally using JDBC. It's a quite different thing. But then again, we once we specify all of these things, we need not to bother about how to call them and how to get those results. We'll get very some of the simple methods. Okay, now there's a method called execute, my execute method, which returns me a map, and here I am having nothing but I am placing the name in this. So actually this is what I have done for creation of the procedure. Okay, so now I need to call this procedure, or I need to execute this procedure. To execute this procedure, I need to call the execute method of the stored procedure class. So I'm not using directly that, I will be calling my execute method, and in my execute method I'll pass my name. So I'll to call the execute method, it takes a map of inputs. So I'll just pass the map of inputs whatever I want. Okay, so in this way, this is the methodology. This method is used to execute the procedure, and this block of code is used to create the procedure. Okay, once again we'll walk through. first we need to specify the data source and the procedure name. Then we need to specify whether it's a function or a procedure. Then we need to specify all of the parameters in and out. We need to set those parameters using set parameters method. We need to do a call to the compile so that this procedure gets compiled. So all of these four steps are mandatory. So to execute a method or to execute a procedure, we need to call a execute method of stored procedure class, which takes the input of a map, and that map should consist of all the input parameters. So I'll call that using my execute method. Okay. So in our class, if you see, here's my another method called get employee details. And a very important thing to notice that is this is not a separate class. The class what we have created just now, it's an inner class. Okay. So if we have got any stored procedure, that should be done in this way. We need to create a static inner class and use that. Okay. It should be a static inner class that will be extending some predefined stored procedure class. So I got my one business method called get employee details, taking argument of data source and ename. So based on the data source and ename, I'll call my procedure. So once I'm getting the object of this my stored procedure, now I'm calling one argument constructor by providing the data source. So we know that from earlier discussion, if you call one argument constructor, our procedure will get created. This block of code, right? So procedure gets created when I call the constructor in this way of my class. So my execute method, if I say map results equals my execute, so if I'm providing the name, I'm saying that in this method I'm calling the super dot execute of a map with input things. The input is specified by the string whatever we pass it as an argument. So my execute has input ename. So whatever the ename will be, all of those results I'll get as a map. So list, once I get the results, I'm just setting those results, map of results, I'm setting those results to my employee class. Okay. Result dot get info, result dot get designation and salary. So after typecasting it to the specific data type, I'm just setting it to my employee object. So this method I'll be using in my main class. So here again I'm creating the diagram manager data source class myself. I'm not using core container. I'm setting the driver name, URL, username and password. Then I'm simply making a call to this method which internally calls the other methods. Okay, which internally calls, we have seen the procedure methods and returns me the result. So when I do employee dot get employee details with stored function procedure, when I call this method, I'll get the result in an object form. So I'm just printing it out. Okay, a little bit different scenario. It's not the same thing as Hibernate or JDBC. It's a quite different one because as we have seen that everything here is a template. So here also it's kind of like a template thing. We are creating our own template for procedures. Okay, we are not using callable statements and all those things. Then again, here also it's not mandatory to do some common logics. The common logics what we have done. There's no reason like I just wanted to do it, I did that. Here why I Don't concentrate on this thing. I just did it on a whim. That is not an important example what I wanted to show in this example. In this example I wanted to show you the procedure thing, how to create and work with the procedure. Okay. So this is nothing but our Pojo, simple plain old Pojo. It has nothing else other than some private variables and setters and getters and toString method. Okay. So this is how we work with procedures in Spring JDBC. So we'll just end our session today, and tomorrow mostly we'll be completing our Spring JDBC module. Then we'll jump for ORM. Okay. Yeah. Let me just see where is that module again. We are going step by step, right? So where that module comes, I need to check with that. So we are in this module. So JDBC ORM. Okay, in this module, so mostly in within 4 to 5 days we'll be before 4 to 5 days only we'll be having a look with the JMS. Okay. Yeah, I think I have them, but not in a good format. So that I could share with you. It's a very bad format example, so I'll make them in a good format and I'll present it to you. 2 or 3 servers. You need example with 2 or 3 servers. Okay, I need to look into that. I need to spend some time. Okay, sure. We'll try to do that. Okay. Okay, then see you. Bye.